Hello and welcome students to this class of Spoken English. This is your English teacher Swarnali Roy. We will be moving on to Module 5. Today we are going to discuss direct and indirect speech. Now, what are direct and indirect speeches? We use direct speech when we simply repeat what someone says, putting the phrase between speech marks. Paul came in and said, "I am really hungry." It is an example of direct speech. Now, it is very common to see direct speech used in books or in a newspaper article. For example, the local MP said, "We plan to make this city a safer place for everyone." Now, as you can see, with direct speech, it is common to use the verb to say or said. But you can also find other verbs used to indicate direct speech, such as ask, reply, and shout. For example, when Mrs. Diaz opened the door, I asked, "Have you seen Lee?" She replied, "No, I haven't seen him since lunchtime." The boss was angry and shouted, "Why isn't he here? He hasn't finished the report yet." Also, you need to understand that you can use single inverted commas while quoting sentences instead of double inverted commas. Now, what is indirect speech? When we want to report what someone said without speech marks and without necessarily using exactly the same words, we can use indirect speech, which is also called reported speech. For example, if the direct speech is, "We are quite cold in here," indirect speech will be, "They say that they are cold." When we report what someone says in the present simple tense, as in the above sentence, we normally don't change the tense. We simply change the subject. However, when we report things in the past, we usually change the tense by moving it one step back. For example, in the following sentence, the present simple becomes the past simple in indirect speech. Direct speech, "I have a new car." Indirect speech, "He said he had a new car." You can also look at this illustration to have a fair idea. There are certain changes which take place when changing sentences from direct to indirect speech. For example, today becomes that day, yesterday becomes the day before yesterday becomes 2 days before, tomorrow becomes the next day after tomorrow becomes 2 days later, and so on. Now let's get into the rules. Rule number 1. If the reported verb is a past tense, the tense of the verb in the reported speech must be changed to the past tense. To work out this rule in detail, the following special rules must be observed. The present tense in the reported speech must be changed to corresponding past form. For example, in the direct speech, "He said Rama shall come." In the indirect speech, it will be, "He said that Rama should come." Also, special rule number 2. The simple past tense in the reported speech is often but not always changed to the past perfect. For example, in the direct speech, Ali said, "I drank water after the meal." In the indirect speech, it will be, Ali said that he drank water after the meal. Special rule number 3. The past continuous tense in the reported speech must be changed to the past perfect continuous. For example, direct speech, "He said Sita was dancing." In the indirect speech, it will be, "He said that Sita had been dancing." Now, there is an exception to Rule 1. What is it? If the reported speech relates to some universal or habitual fact, the simple present tense in the reported speech remains unchanged. For example, direct speech, "He said man is mortal." In direct speech, "He said that man is mortal." Rule number 2. If the reporting verb is in present or future tense, the tense of the verb in the reported speech is not changed at all. For example, direct speech. The servant says tea is ready. In direct speech, the servant says that tea is ready. Rule number 3. Pronouns and possessive adjectives of the first and second persons in direct speech are changed into the third person in indirect speech. For example, direct speech, Rama said, I am ill. In direct speech, Rama said that he was ill. Now, note this fact. If the person addressed reports the speech, the second person is changed to first. For example, direct speech, he said to me, you are stupid. In direct speech, he told me that I was stupid. Now coming on to questions. In reporting a question in the indirect speech, we need to follow certain rules. First rule, the verb is changed to asked, inquired, demanded, etc. Rule number 2, whether or if is used after verbs whenever the direct question admits of one or two answers which are yes or no. Direct speech, he said to me, do you know the way? In direct speech, he asked me if I knew the way. Rule number 3. For questions starting with question words like what, where, when, who, etc., we report the question using the question word but change the interrogative form to the affirmative form. For example, direct speech. The teacher said to me, what are you doing? In direct speech, the teacher asked me what I was doing. Moving on to commands and requests. Now, there are again certain rules to follow in reporting commands and requests in indirect speech. The first rule is that the verb is changed into request, beg, implore, order, command, advise, threaten, etc. Rule number 2. The verb in reported speech is put in the infinitive, that is, to plus verb. For example, direct speech, he said to me, give me your pencil. In direct speech, he asked me to give him my pencil. Rule number 3. When let in the direct speech expresses a proposal or suggestion, we may use should and change the reporting verb into propose or suggest. For example, direct speech, she said to us, let us have some music. In direct speech, she proposed or suggested to us that we should have some music. About exclamations and wishes. In reporting a wish or an exclamation in the indirect speech, there are certain rules again. The first rule, the verb is changed into wish, bless, pray, cry, exclaim, declare, etc. with such phrases as with regret, with delight or joy, with sorrow where necessary. Rule number 2. The exclamations, oh, well, hurrah, alas, etc. are omitted and their sense is expressed by means of phrases. For example, direct speech, what a terrible storm it is, he said. In direct speech, he exclaimed that it was a terrible storm. Direct speech, she said, alas, how foolish have I been. In direct speech, she confessed with regret that she had been very foolish. Direct speech, he said, goodbye, friends. In direct speech, he bade farewell to his friends. Now, you can go through this table as a summary of what we have learned in this entire video. Take your time, read the tenses and read the transformation from direct to indirect speech. This much on this topic. I bid adieu to you, my dear students. Thank you for being patient.